And what really worked very well was, especially in Palestine, but also in Latin, the fact that obviously students find that this is a different way of learning that they like, and they find it engaging and challenging. And they also really like the fact that they're not told kind of how things are. They get to experiences, they get to interact with it, they get to take decisions. And they also kind of acknowledges that when they have to, take this more active approach to knowledge and use it for something and interact with it, then it sticks better. And that's kind of what reflects it in these quotes from a variety of students. And the teachers kind of have the same understanding that it's a good way to learn because students are active seekers of knowledge. And it makes meaningful instead of having information and knowledge chunked up in a textbook format. It's actually layered into a meaningful universe where you have to solve problems, you have goals, and it's not just kind of abstract, detached information. And the third thing that also most of the teachers actually recognize is that this is a way to make something that is very far away from most students, make it come much closer. So when you talk about conflicts in Palestine or in Latin America, then most students are kind of sitting in their comfort zone and not really being quite aware of what's going on. But by using by immersing them in this universe and making them interact with characters and making them identify with these and their problems, then it becomes much closer and much more difficult for the students to just say, "Oh, this is just something that goes on the other side of the world, and that I don't care." Which again makes the learning experience stronger and the motivation to understand what's going on much stronger. Then I wanted to put in a few design lessons that I guess we kind of knew before we started, but now we know even more. It seems very basic, but consequences are really crucial to engage students, and very often it's quite tricky when you do educational products, because the minute that you have consequences in a game like ours and also a lot of other games, you risk that the students send them back to start, or you punish them, or you kind of put them out on detours, and that's very difficult to control in an educational setting. So, for example, you have a classic like a branching story, and if you say if you have like a right or wrong or a certain branch, then you can't control where the students have been, and you can't control how long they play, and it gets very difficult. And we try to get around this by having a more linear story, but that kind of takes away the engagement and the challenge for the students. So you really have to get these consequences in there. You also have to be pretty careful not kind of expecting that if you make learning and knowledge kind of implicitly in the game universe, then students will automatically recognize it. And just because we or a teacher recognizes that there's learning, then students will also recognize it. It has to be, you have to have this debriefing evaluation where you kind of explicitly engage and kind of observe and reflect on the experience that you have in the game to actually make this educational experience stick and transfer it beyond the game context. Well, simple and relevant, you tend to, you need to get a very basic dynamic working, and don't take too many detours, because it's just going to make things more difficult for you instead of trying to find this basic core that works. Another thing that we kind of learned was that feedback has to be close in time and very explicit to the student. Again, this is quite difficult, because when we want to do like a meaningful and realistic universe, so sometimes it becomes quite difficult to actually tell students that something happened and something else didn't happen, and that they should have done this instead of this, or if they had done this, then this would have happened, without becoming breaking the immersion. But it's quite important nevertheless, because otherwise students will kind of not really recognize what happened. They need help to kind of see some of these dilemmas and choices and consequences. That's part of the universe. Then the next one is building dilemmas with branching is hard, buggy, and costly. This is a very specific lesson from when the Palestine game, we did like a branching structure that went like this. So I think there was like 1 million different options, which was great because it meant that you had a different experience. Not so great testing-wise, because we still keep finding a few bugs now and then. That's a very difficult way to do it, so we changed that system for Latin. And the final one that's also pretty interesting, which is really not about the game as such, but it's very much about how you use games in the educational setting. If you frame it as now you're going to play a game, then most of the time, you set expectations in the students that are quite difficult to achieve. If you present it as a simulation, a role-playing experience, a different kind of interactive educational experience, then it's much easier for the students to recognize what this is. They will, if you present it as a game, they will play it like a game. They will expect that it's, when we did it with Palestine and Latin, they say, oh, this is not completely the nice graphics like Grand Theft Auto, and can I beat people I meet on the street, and can I drive around in the cars, etc., etc. Whereas when you introduce it as an educational experience, an interactive experience, an immersive simulation, etc., then they have a completely different approach to the game when they start out, which makes it much more successful, both actually as a engaging, interesting experience for the student, but also educational-wise. I think this is most of what I have. Just to sum up a bit, as I said previously, I think that there is a lot of potential in using games for education. I think we can use it for much more complex areas, for adults, for seniors, etc., that we've been doing so far. But I think that we should probably look a bit more at how actually commercial games work, because any game is a learning machine, and there's no need for us to transfer the way that we're doing it in other mediums, like in the book or in television, to games. Instead, we should look to how games actually work and has been developed for the last 30 years. I hope there is time for a bit of questions, right? Yeah, 5 minutes, yeah. Just before that, just some contact info. You're most welcome to email if you have questions, concerns, maybe not jokes, but yeah, feel free to contact me. The first one, the URL is seriousgames.dk, that's the company, Global Conflict are the games, and the Egenfeldt.eu is the research. So that should kind of give you different venues to explore. Thanks for listening, and yeah. So, any questions? Yeah? It's for the Palestine one mostly, because Latin just released a couple of months ago, so that's a bit early. For the Palestine one, the retail games is in the couple of thousands, and for the educational sales it's still in the hundreds. So, and mostly we've been selling, the retail version for Palestine has basically been in Germany, and the educational version have so far basically been in Denmark and Sweden. So what we're trying to do is obviously to kind of expand that and get a foot in other markets. But that's both tricky in the retail section, but even more tricky in the educational section, because there's a lot of gatekeepers in the different educational system that you kind of have to pass through. But I think in Denmark we actually have something like more than 10% of the schools have bought the game. So obviously if we can get the same kind of hit ratio in other countries, that would be nice. And actually, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, we've sold to the education version and also the private version to Singapore, Mexico, Italy, Spain, France, Netherlands, Germany, pretty much all countries. But obviously, it's like, a few sales around the world, and then the majority is actually in the countries where you have a formalized setup, and it's really, really tricky to get through in the educational systems. I think it's also basically because we made it CD-ROM based, which is really not the right way to do it. But the technology that we used were too immature to online service at that point. Yeah. Yeah.